the sequel, the difficult second album. That's the problem when you set the bar as high as Hyundai did when they gave us the IONIQ 5N back in 2024. Not just the car that was the AutoEV car of the year, but a car that I said was probably the best electric car I'd ever driven, as well as being one of the best performance cars that I'd ever driven. And a lot of my contemporaries agreed with me. Even people that had been quite harsh against electric cars when they drove it turned around and went, wow, this really has upped the game. This has moved the goalpost quite considerably. And that's now the issue that Hyundai have. How do you do it? How do you move on from the IONIQ 5N? Well, you go one better with the IONIQ 6N. And this is it, the difficult second album, the sequel to the blockbuster. As I say, welcome to this week's edition of Sneak Peeks. Welcome to the new Hyundai IONIQ 6N, and as always, welcome to AutoEV. Now, before I get started on this week's edition of Sneak Peeks and the new Hyundai IONIQ 6N, it is of course the time where I would just ask a small favour from you, if you don't mind. Would you just make sure you're subscribed to the AutoEV channel? Then when you've done that, make sure you press the little bell button that's down below, because that's the way that you get notified when our next video is uploaded and it's gone live. Once you've watched it, if you enjoy it, obviously give it a little thumbs up, and as always, don't forget, leave me your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about the cars that we feature on the channel, such as the new Hyundai IONIQ 6N, and of course on the AutoEV channel overall. So, as I say, the follow-up to the brilliant IONIQ 5M. And we've seen sort of this car before in some respects. Back in 2022, Hyundai showed us a concept based on the IONIQ 6, the RN22E, which was sort of rolling laboratory, if you like, of what could be possible with that car. And it was fair to say that the game was up at that point. We knew that the second car, the second sort of, like, as I say, difficult album, was going to be based on the rather brilliant IONIQ 6. But they've gone one stage further with this. This is not just sort of like IONIQ 5N running gear in IONIQ 6 body. They've done a lot more to it. And of course, Hyundai's N division has previous here, because with their combustion engine cars, the i20N and i30N hot hatchbacks, well, they're filled with sort of like adoration and plaudits from both press and customers alike. So there's a big high expectation that comes from Hyundai's wearing the fabled N badge. And of course, with the 5N, we got an absolutely brilliant driver's car. And as I say, probably the best electric car that I've ever driven, and one of the best performance cars that's available today, I think. But I am told there's a lot changed with the 6N, and it's a very different car indeed. How different? Well, that'll have to wait till we drive it. But why don't we have a little walk around it within these studios, talk you around what's new about it, talk you around some various bits that I can tell you about, and see what we think. Now, as always, we're going to start with how the car looks, which is very different to the IONIQ 6 that obviously that we've been used to for the last few years, because it's had a facelift. Now, here's the thing about the facelifted car. I wasn't really sure about it, in fairness. I really liked the fact that Hyundai were doing something very, very different to other manufacturers. They call it sort of like their chessboard, if you like, where all the sort of like, they say that all the pieces, they're playing for the same team, but they don't necessarily have to look the same, which is why the IONIQ 6 had that sort of Raymond Loewy streamliner look when he obviously had the IONIQ 5, which was more of that sort of 1980s bitmap styling. But as I say, they play for the same team, so they're part of the Hyundai family, and you could see that. But now, of course, they've revised the front of the IONIQ 6, and of course the big talking point is much these slimmer headlights here. So of course you get your DRLs around the top here, which of course are the usual pixel, which is the theme that always runs through all of the cars with Hyundai. And then your main lamps are down in here. Now they're going to do an N-line model within the IONIQ 6 range, the standard range, which is going to have a similar sort of feel to this car, so it's a sportier version of the standard car. And then there's the IONIQ 6N, the performance variant of the car. So you've obviously got two-tone sort of like finish here. This is the metallic race blue, which is quite a nice finish. Difficult to see obviously under studio lights, but it's a really nice sparkle to the finish on the car. And then you've got this sort of titanium finish in here, and then the gloss black with the red sort of like stripe around the bottom. There's active cooling at the front as well, so the open grille is there. The active flaps are actually behind that, and obviously they'll open and close depending obviously on when cooling is needed. You've got some nice integrated technology there, because you've got your front facing camera just sitting below the blacked out Hyundai logo there. There's no, we'll talk about practicality in a second, but there's no frunk on the car. There's no front boot, if you like, because it's an all-wheel drive car, so there's no storage space at the front. And it does have quite a sort of like trick chassis setup, which we're not really knowing an awful lot about at the moment, because Hyundai are going to tell us about that when the car launches. There we go. But there's a lot of aero work. You can see here you've got sort of like, you know, these dive planes here, these air curtains which channel airflow around the standard 20-inch alloy wheels, which is interesting because IONIQ 5N gets 21-inch wheels. These are 20-inch wheels. So it does make me think there's a lot more development gone into it, that they haven't just stuck a big set of wheels on it. But let's take a walk around the rest of it and see what we think. Now obviously in side profile you can see that it's an IONIQ 6, you know, so of course you've got that, as I say, drooping towards the rear of the car, that streamliner Raymond Loewy sort of design, but the addition of the rear wing, which we'll get to as we move down there. Now as I say, of course you've got the 20-inch alloy wheels, which are standard. They've also got fitted with Pirelli P05 tyres on it as well, which is quite interesting, bespoke for this car. You've also got 400mm discs up at front with a 4-piston caliper, 360mm discs at the back. So there's good braking performance on the car. Also slightly wider track as well, as you would expect. But as I say, in terms of its styling, well, as I say, it's recognisable as an IONIQ 6, isn't it? But of course you get this two-tone finish, which is familiar to the IONIQ 5 as well, on the N, where you've got sort of, you know, the sort of two-tone finish with the bodywork here, and then the gloss black at the bottom with the red stripe through it. But as I say, it all culminates into this sort of like rear end of the car, which is that like lovely sort of like teardrop shape. This very sort of, the rear end always reminded me as a sort of mix between sort of like the Mercedes-Benz CLS and an old Saab as well. It's a really nice sort of like rear end to the car. And again, the bodywork's different here. So again, helping airflow out of the, you know, to reduce pressure in the rear wheel arches. You know, airflow will come back out of here. And as I say, some very trick aero work on the car, not least of which is this. So let's go and have a look around the back and see what they've done differently. Now obviously it's the rear of the car where you notice a massive difference, which is this rear wing. Now in terms of aerodynamics, it's a 0.274 CD factor. And the rear end styling has changed as well, because what you used to have was the pixelated light bar that went all the way across here. Now that's still on the case when you get the standard IONIQ 6, but if you go for say the N line or the IONIQ 6N, you now have it stopping here with then just the little pixels in actually the boot lid, which I quite like. I think that's quite cool, I do like that. And then the blacked out IONIQ 6 lettering there with just the N badge there. Obviously the rear diffuser, as I say, I talked about the airflow of the car. You know, it's designed to also, you know, sort of like help keep the car sort of like suckered down onto the ground and manage the airflow that's coming round from it. And of course you get the additional lamps down at the bottom there in this gloss black area here. And then of course you've got your twin spoiler, if you like, your little ducktail that's here that's quite pronounced. That also houses a camera pod as well. So your boot release is there, and you've got a couple of little cameras on there. And then there's this, the large rear wing, which is also optimised for aerodynamics that you'll only get on the IONIQ 6N. So it's not like this is an N-lined thing either, it is on just the N model, and that's fixed into this, like this area just below the rear window. So what do we think? Well, it's certainly not a Q car, is it? It's certainly not hiding its light under a bushel. There's no doubt in your mind whatsoever that what you're looking at is an N car. And that's an important badge, I think. As I say, when you think back to the combustion engine cars that Hyundai were giving us, such as the i20N and the i30N, and how well received they were, the IONIQ 5N even moved that on. Will we expect the same from the IONIQ 6N? Well, as I say, it's obviously have to wait till we actually drive the car. But on first acquaintance with it, well, it's not exactly for shrinking violence, is it? But I have to admit, I do quite like it. The little boy racer in me does actually quite like what they've done with this. But what do you think? Because that's the most important thing. On looks alone, do you think they've done the right job? I quite like the new front end. But what do you think of this? Too much? Not enough? Let me know your thoughts down below. Now, obviously, because it looks like an IONIQ 6, and no doubt it will drive quite like an IONIQ 6 in some respects, it has to be as practical as IONIQ 6, is it? Well, you've got 401 litres of boot space. It's always a surprise when you open the boot on an IONIQ 6 in some respects, because you do think of it as a hatchback, but it's not. It's an actual 3-box saloon with a separate boot. 401 litres. The only difference that you now have in here is there's a standard strut brace in the back there. This red painted strut brace that goes across the back. Now, as I say, they're keeping sort of like, you know, technical specifications of chassis and stuff quite low key at the moment, but we are led to believe that there's going to be some quite special things when it comes to the chassis setup of the car, and that's your first starter for 10, that something is quite interesting going to happen with this car and the way it's been developed. You've also got a tiny little bit of underfloor storage, but that's for things such as your vehicle to load adapter and obviously your tire mobility kit. You know, I would think obviously cables are going to have to come in a separate bag, which I assume will be sort of, you know, stored somewhere in there in terms of tying it to something or velcroing it to the side. But it's, you know, it's a relatively practical car, you know, in the sense that obviously these performance saloon cars such as BMW M3s, Mercedes C63 MGs, Audi RS4s always have been, you know, you've still got an element of practicality about it, and it's no different here. And obviously rear seat space is the same as well, because you've got a huge amount of space back here. Now obviously, as I say, we're used to that with the IONIQ 6, but it gives another practicality to a performance car when it's got this amount of room in the back of it. Of course, it sits on the eGMP platform that we're used to from Hyundai Group, so you've got a completely flat floor across as well, so even 3 abreast isn't really going to be much of a problem, and it feels a much bigger car than sort of like the external footprint would maybe have you believe, even with these sort of, you know, bucket style seats that are in the front of it as well. You get some nice ambient lighting. Now black is your standard colour, that's it. It's going to come with a black interior, so you can't go for a lighter, you know, to lighten it up inside. This is what your choice is, but you do have some nice ambient lighting, and of course you've always got that nice sort of like, you know, I always like the materials that Hyundai use on the inside of the car, almost this sort of corrugated sort of like, you know, recycled sort of like plastic on the side, and of course with the ambient lighting it just shows it off just in a really nice way. There's some very slim door pockets there. There's no pockets on the backs of the front seats, but of course you do get a centre armrest with cup holders, and you also get 2 USB-C charging ports down in the back of the centre console, plus a tiny little sort of like scalloped out little bit there you can hide your pole laments in. But as I say, in terms of it being a performance car, it's a very practical performance car because there's plenty of rear room. Now the interior is a very special place to be. I think it always was in the IONIQ 6, but it just feels even more special here. Now that's helped in part obviously by these bucket seats, which, like the old Kia EV6 GT, are manual. That's the only thing that I would say would be maybe have been slightly nice to see, is electric memory seats on the car like Kia now have an EV6 GT. They tell me it's to save weight, so, you know, fair enough, that's there. But you do get the sort of like reach and rake adjustment on the steering wheel, and there's a lot to talk about on the steering wheel. As you can see, there's a lot of buttons in this car. You know, whilst there is a lot to deal with through the screen, which obviously we'll discuss as we go through it, there is still a huge amount of buttons available. Now of course what you don't get is buttons on the door, which makes it feel even more here. So you've got the buttons for the electric window switches, 4 of them here. You get things like the heated steering wheel, parking sensors, the heated seats, ventilated seats as well. You know, sort of like on here, they're all buttons on here rather than being down here or on the door as well. So it makes it feel like there's a lot going on. But it's a very practical interior as well. You get things like the wireless charging pad, a couple of cup holders, you get a slot there just for storage. There's also this massive big storage bin underneath this floating console here, plus obviously a storage box in the middle there as well. And then obviously you've got all your climate control system here, which again is all controlled via sort of like, you know, this touch screen here, which you can sort of like up and down your temperatures here, or your airflow distribution, or your fan speed and things like that. So that's all there. And then you've got your shortcut buttons for this screen. So as I say, it's 2 12.3 inch displays that we've been used to seeing from the Hyundai Group. And then you get shortcut buttons here, so if you want to go to your map, obviously it's just a shortcut button there. Sorry, just inside a studio, so obviously, you know, things like media, your setup, tuning the radio, volume. So if you don't want to keep using screens, you're all right, because there's plenty of buttons. And then you've got this 3-spoke steering wheel, which seems to be festooned with buttons on them as well, because as you can imagine, it has a lot of different modes on this car. Now it depends obviously on what you want to do. You can really set this car up to be quite individual, and depending obviously on you as a driver what you want. I've got my iPad here because there's an awful lot to discuss with this car. You've got these 2 buttons here, these 2 N buttons here. So one of them does your N mode, And then one does actually just sort of like actual sort of your N shift, if you like. So for your, because you've got the virtual gear shift as well. So you've got the 8-speed virtual gear shift that's available here. The other thing that it can do as well is, as you know, because we've driven obviously the IONIQ 5N and the new Kia EV6 GT that has these virtual gear shifts, it hits a red line, effectively, a limiter, if you like. And what you used to get before in the IONIQ 5N was the limiter, the dials would flash red. Now what happens is the whole interior, the ambient lighting, flashes when you hit that limiter to make you realise, yeah, I've got the limiter, now I'm going for another gear. And then you change up. I'm told this whole thing is incredibly interactive with you as a driver. And as I say, given how good the IONIQ 5N is, and they're saying that they've gone even better with this car, I am absolutely itching to drive it and see what it's actually like. Anyway, that's your 2 buttons there, so that's what those do. You've then got standard drive mode buttons, so you know, your usual eco, normal and sport. You've then got this NGB, which is N Grin Boost. I kid you not, that's what it stands for, which gives you the 10-second sort of like maximum torque and power at the driven wheels, you know, to squeeze past slow and moving traffic, and it dumps all the power to the road, and it slingshot you past something. Or if you're on a track day and no reason you shouldn't be, you know, you're maybe trying to go slow past slow and moving traffic, then obviously you can use that. Your actual gear shift itself is the transmission wand that we're used to with Hyundai here. So you've got your usual twist forward for drive, back for neutral, and back again for reverse. P at the end there, and of course usual column stocks. And obviously you've got your driver monitor there as well. A really nice steering wheel. It looks like there's an awful lot going on, but it's actually a really nice wheel to hold. It's a nice diameter. The rim itself is a nice thickness, and of course you've got your perforated leather and smooth leather there, and it's pleasingly round. That's the other thing I will say about it. The driver's display is lovely. I really like the driver's display on the car as well. So again, depending on the mode you're in will depend obviously on what's maybe shown on here as well. So you can have various different setup layouts, and it can tell you various different bits of information. For instance, at the moment, this car in the studio setup shows temperature of the motor, temperature of the battery, and then of course you've got your trip computer over this side in terms of, you know, sort of like how far you've got to go before a charge, and your actual trip meter itself. And then there's various little lights up here as well, showing us what we've got, you know, how many sort of like, you know, I suppose stages we're at with the motor, the steering, and the dampers, because this is going to have electronically controlled dampers as well. So there we go. This screen here obviously is where everything is controlled through. Now it's fairly standard to think that you're going to have things such as, you know, your usual setup for phone projection, entertainment, you know, this thing got cinema on there as well, dash cam. You can go in here to sort of like set various different things up. That's going to be no different to you're used to with any other style of Hyundai electric car. However, if we go right back to the start there, we've got N mode. So if I press this now gives us access to the N menus, if you like, where we can start to set things up. So N track, N battery, so we've got torque distribution, the N pedal, the drift optimizer, which as I said we've got there. Now let me just tell you about the specification sheet, what this thing has is, so it has, these are the features for the performance of this car: N launch control, adjusting motor torque to optimal acceleration for a race-inspired takeoff from a standstill. Interestingly, they're not telling us the 0 to 60 time of this car. They're holding that back from us at the moment, but I would guess it's probably going to be under where the IONIQ 5N is, and that's 3.4 seconds, I think it is. So I think this is going to be a faster car off the line. You've got NE shift, which as I say is obviously your thing there. N active sound plus. There's the virtual gear shift, but there's also the noise as well. The actual sort of, there's the sound generator as well in the car, which obviously moves from via the gear shifts as well. So you'll get this sort of like an engine noise as such as you accelerate. And I'm told it's something quite special. We can't hear it on this car because it's in the studio, but I'm told it's quite something special. N grin boost we've talked about. N battery, that preconditions the battery to the optimal temperature, depending obviously on what you're going to be doing with it. So again, if you're on track perhaps, or you're a rather spirited drive, then you obviously can set that up. Then there's the N drift optimizer. Now, the N drift optimizer, you can go into here, and you can get various. You can get various different. So even you can increase your angles. Look at this. Initiation, angle, you can change the angle of it. It's got, sorry, it's because it's in a studio.
At least one window is open.
That's the problem when you review cars in a studio, unfortunately, but there we go. Let me turn it back on. So if I go back to where it was there, where are we? Initiation, here we go. You've got various different, I think it goes up to about, yeah, it goes up to 10 different settings, and the same for wheel slip as well, 10 different settings. So you can vary it depending on the angle and the aggressiveness of the drift you want. You know, if you're not particularly good at it, you might just have a smaller angle. If you really want to hang the tail out, you can do such clever stuff. Anyway, that's what that all is there. Then we've got N torque distribution. And this provides a variable front and rear torque distribution. Now that can be adjusted up to 11 levels, not 10, 11. Remember, this is the Nigel Toughen the lamp. This one goes up to 11. And then obviously things such as tire pressure monitoring. So there's a huge amount you can tailor depending obviously on what you want as a driver. Plus you've also got, look at these, you've got all the different tracks that are available to you as well. I don't know if this is set up in this particular car here, but yeah, there's various different tracks that you can have as well. So it will help you learn the track, and then obviously you can lap time it as well. So it shows you all the different tracks, and obviously they'll be set up in the car when you get it. You've also obviously got things such as your lap timer there as well. Plus you've got extra gauges that you can do there for motor temperature. You can change the gauges on there. And then obviously on this one here, that was the drift optimizer we were on. So there's a huge amount to learn about this car when it comes to the interior in terms of learning all of this for the N model. And it's absolutely fantastic. And this is modern performance cars. This is what they're getting. Now, whether you agree with that or not, it doesn't make any difference. There's part of the, you know, obviously this is the type of thing that's come from the gaming industry. And the people that are buying, you know, performance cars these days, dare I suggest in their younger years, have been used to gaming. That's the sort of thing that appeals to them, and that's the sort of thing that the Hyundai N division see as sort of like future with performance cars. And I think this thing's going to be an absolute weapon to drive on the road. I really do. I cannot wait to drive it. But as I say, for the rest of us, for us old dears, it is an IONIQ 6 interior, which means it's comfortable, which means it's spacious, which means there's plenty of storage, but there's also plenty of gadgets if you want to have a play. Now the car's going to come fitted with an 84 kilowatt hour battery that should see it travel up to around about 469 kilometres. That's 291 miles if you're using the correct measurement of distance. But that's not homologated as yet, so that's an estimate of what they can expect. It's a slightly better range than you get from the IONIQ 5N using the battery because it's slightly lighter in weight, believe it or not, and also when it comes down to aerodynamics, the car is very aero efficient as well. Now in terms of charging speeds, well, you can charge using a 350 kilowatt ultra rapid charger, and that should see the car deliver a 10 to 80% charge in around about 18 minutes during optimal conditions. And as I say, you get vehicle to load as standard with the car. Now, believe it or not, Hyundai are remaining quite tight-lipped when it comes to the actual performance of this car. There's not really an awful lot I can actually tell you about it at the time I'm actually doing the filming of this, because they're holding it all back for the car's global reveal, which is going to be at the Goodwood Festival of Speed in July. But what I can tell you this, it produces 641 horsepower through dual motors to all four wheels onto the road. And given that the IONIQ 5N with similar power does a 0 to 60 time in 3.5 seconds, and this car is more aero efficient and a little bit lighter, I think we're looking at a 0 to 60 sprint that's going to dip below that 3.5 seconds. But as I say, it's not just about speed. As you know, if you're a regular viewer of AutoEV, as we've always said, it's very easy to make an electric car fast. Making it fun to drive is something entirely different. And this is why I've got a lot of confidence here, because Hyundai's N division have so much experience at delivering proper, dyed-in-the-wool enthusiast cars. Not just the IONIQ 5N, but if you look at their combustion engine cars, there was the i20 and the i30, and both of those are brilliant hot hatchbacks. But as I say, they really shifted the bar when they gave us the IONIQ 5N. And they tell me that this car is set up to be very, very different and drive very differently to the IONIQ 5N. So I can imagine if that's what they managed to do with the 5, what they're going to manage to do with the 6 should be quite interesting indeed. But it's going to have to wait for the full AutoEV road test review till we deliver a verdict on that. So please, as always, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. And as I can't tell you about the performance, I can't really tell you an awful lot about the price either, because they've kept that under wraps from us as well. However, if I was to take a wild stab in the dark, as Blackadder once said, then I would suggest maybe it's going to be somewhere north of £60,000, probably less than £70,000. I think if you were in that sort of ballpark, you wouldn't be far away from what it's going to be revealed when they finally pull the covers off at Goodwood. And when we talk about competitors for the car, well, can you think of one? Because that's the thing with it. As I say, there are plenty of fast four-door electric cars, you know, the Polestar 2 dual motor, the Tesla Model 3 Performance, you know, but then again, the standard IONIQ 6 dual motor car wasn't exactly a slow car. This is the point. We're now starting to be able to sort of like really compare electric cars to combustion engine cars, not just with their sort of like their performance, but also the way they drive. And I think it's Hyundai that have really led the charge, if you'll pardon the pun, with that. So maybe you might actually consider one of these instead of something like a BMW M3. But bear in mind, BMW also have the i4 M50. Although it's not a full-blooded M car, it has been fettled by the M division. But again, the M3, the next M3 we're seeing, is going to have an electric version as well, because BMW want to move into the electrified performance car arena. So maybe the Hyundai are getting an absolute march on people like that. But as I say, there's very few and far between proper performance-focused electric four-door saloon cars. Hyundai are starting a bit of a trend, folks. Hyundai have got form here when it comes to delivering proper drivers' cars. In some respects, they were the first Korean manufacturer really to do that when they gave us the cars such as, I say, the i30N and the i20N. And then they raised the bar. They moved it into the electrified arena with the IONIQ 5N. And we mention that car a huge amount on the channel because it is such a good car. It really has. If you haven't driven the IONIQ 5N, then dare to suggest that it's hard to imagine how an electric car can behave like a combustion engine performance car and improve on that. But that's exactly what that car does. Now, as I say, as much as information has been a little bit scant when it comes to sort of like this car in terms of what they've actually done to chassis work and the way that it's going to drive and the performance that it offers, even down to dare to suggest how much it's going to cost, knowing that it's come from Hyundai's N division, a division of engineers that know how to set up a proper performance car and also know how then to apply that into the electric car world, gives me a huge amount of confidence that what we will have when we finally do get behind the wheel of the IONIQ 6N is yet another masterpiece, is yet another proof that electric cars can deliver exactly the same driver and enthusiast thrills that we've come to expect from cars and with combustion engines over all these years. I've got no doubt in my mind that this is going to be yet another winner from Hyundai. Thank you for watching another edition of Sneak Peeks on AutoEV. As always, please make sure you are subscribed to the AutoEV channel, and then when you've done that, make sure you then press the little bell button that's down below, because that's the way you'll be notified when our next video is uploaded and it's gone live. If you have enjoyed this week's edition of Sneak Peeks, and obviously I hope you have, give it a little thumbs up for me, and as always, leave me your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think? Have you got high hopes for this car? Have you got an IONIQ 5N at the moment? Would you consider trading up? Have you got a BMW M3? And now this is tickling your pickle. Let me know in the comment section down below. Now remember, we're across on all social media channels as well, so if you're interested in things such as Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and X and TikTok and all those type of things that the kids are down with, then give us a follow there as well, because that certainly does help us. Maybe you're not in the marketplace for a new IONIQ 6N, but maybe you're in the marketplace for a used IONIQ 6 or an IONIQ 5. But you will need to know a little bit more information before you go and buy one. How do you find out? Well, let me tell you. Stay on the AutoEV homepage on the YouTube channel. Just at the top there's a magnifying glass. And if you type the name of the car you're interested in buying in there, then of course if it's been a new electric car in the UK in the last 5 or 6 years, then we've subjected it to the road test that actual car buyers trust when it comes to choosing their next electric vehicle. And that, folks, is the AutoEV one. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for watching. Thank you for your continued support. I'll see you again soon.